Thank you all for joining us. We are very excited to have you. We'll get started in one more minute as we get the rest of the participants signed on, so just stay tuned. All right. Well, welcome to the Buzz with BCLB. My name is Anjali Patel, and I am the Executive Director of the Berkeley Center for Law and Business, or BCLB. We're gathered here today to actually talk about this concept called steering clear of AI washing. And I'll stop sharing my screen shortly because I wanted to share a couple of facts. So more than 25% of US venture funding has flowed into AI-related companies since the AI boom, say about last year. And over 40% of the S&P 500 companies mentioned AI in their annual reports earlier this year. So as we can see, this is a big moment, big time. And there's a lot of promise that's held in the technology of AI, but there is now some concern that this behavior in some ways mimics that of the dot-com era. And so we're gathered here to see, how do we keep the conversation around AI and the investments in AI true to what they are, true to consumers, true to investors, and ultimately true to itself. And so we're gathered here with a very smart group of folks. But before I introduce to you who they are, I wanted to quickly mention that we will be dropping in the chat CLE information. Please stay for the duration of this conversation in order to receive CLE credit, and keep monitoring the chat for links for the CLE form. We will also drop a link to the Buzz with BCLB website. We will have a couple of other webinars coming up in the next 2 months. One around executive compensation and potentially another one around the workforce. So stay tuned for that. And then finally, we'll also drop our email address in case you have any questions or concerns. Please reach out. We love to hear from you. A quick rundown of how this will go. I'll introduce our speakers. We'll have a discussion, and then towards the end, we'll try to keep some space and time for Q&A. We have a Q&A feature on this webinar, and so feel free to use that to ask questions. So with that, I just want to say welcome, Michael, Christina, and Chrissy. We are so happy to have you. Could we have a bit of an introduction? Why don't we start with you, Christina?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Christina Tatro. My pronouns are she, her. I am Deputy Commissioner for the Office of Financial Technology Innovation. That's the innovation office for California's state financial regulator, the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation. It's great to be here.
How about you, Michael?
Hi, everybody. I'm an attorney in the Division of Advertising Practices of the Federal Trade Commission's Bureau of Consumer Protection in Washington, D.C.
And then Chris?
Yeah, good morning. I'm Chrissy Phillip, and I'm an Assistant Regional Director at the Securities and Exchange Commission here in our San Francisco office, and I'm in the Division of Enforcement.
Well, we are very lucky to have the three of you giving us a pretty broad perspective of just how this big topic of AI, and then specifically AI washing. So let's actually start there. It's in the title. It's, let's just address the elephant in the room right now. Recent scholarship has called for more precise definitions of AI washing, or this concept that's kind of likened to greenwashing, but now in terms of AI. And it's, started to highlight kind of how vague the terminology is. Can you help me understand, how does your agency think about AI washing, whether you have a definition for something like this, and, the cross-agency efforts that might be happening in order to create a more clear framework between states across the federal government in order to help companies that are trying to avoid AI washing actually understand what it is. So why don't we start with you, Chrissy? I'd love to hear, anything. Can you tell us what this thing is?
Yes, it's a great question. And before I get started, as is customary, I just want to note the views I'm expressing today are made in my capacity as an assistant regional director in enforcement at the SEC, but they don't necessarily reflect the views of the commission, the commissioners, or other members of the staff. And so when it comes to AI washing, I think as everyone in the audience is aware, AI has the potential to add a lot of efficiencies and benefits to society at large, to those in the financial industry, to those in the legal profession as well. And being from the SEC, I think of public companies or other issuers potentially using AI to enhance their business's productivity or offer new services to customers. And then I also think, for example, about investment advisors, whether those are human advisors or robo advisors out there who may utilize types of AI to manage clients' accounts or provide investment advice in ways that could be very beneficial to clients. And I think in the big picture, as AI continues to develop, there's going to be a rush to capitalize on investor interest by parties promoting their supposed use of AI. And so now, with all the benefits of AI that are out there, there's also the risk of AI washing. And on the one hand, a company could completely lie about its AI capabilities, claiming it has them when it doesn't. Alternatively, a company could have some AI capabilities, but exaggerate the state of development or the functionality of that AI. So in both instances, the misleading statements about AI are meant to take advantage of investor excitement about the technology and obtain funds from investors. And similarly, investment professionals, including SEC registrants, such as investment advisors, may engage in AI washing, for example, by claiming to use AI models to assist with investment recommendations or trades when they don't actually deploy AI, or when they don't deploy AI in the manner in which they're describing to clients.
Yeah. And I want to get into some of the like finer details about how the agency thinks about that. But, and I have a good question for you to follow on, but I wanted to get Michael in and ask, does this resonate? How does the FTC think of AI washing? And I use the word AI washing, but perhaps there's a different word for it. But please, Michael, I'd also love to bring you in.
Thanks. Well, Chrissy reminded me that I also have to give our usual clear and conspicuous disclaimer whenever FTC staff speaks to people outside the agency. My remarks today don't necessarily reflect the views of the commission or any individual commissioner. So we don't define or even really use the term AI washing, which I think of as being a merely descriptive term roughly equivalent to certain kinds of AI hype. Instead, we see things through the lens of the main law that we oversee, which is the FTC Act, which covers unfair or deceptive practices in commerce. And that includes deceptive advertising about all kinds of products or services. And state AG offices have very similar authority under state laws. So deceptive claims can be expressed or implied. They can include efficacy claims, that is, does your product work as advertised? Unsubstantiated claims, that is, are you making claims for which you would need but don't have supporting evidence of some kind? Establishment claims, where the question is, are you falsely saying that scientific tests prove what your product does? Comparative claims, are you falsely claiming your AI product is better than another one, for example? And what one might call false ingredient type claims. Are you claiming something untrue about what your product is or how it was made? And over the years, over decades, we've brought many cases involving such deceptive ad claims. And products and services that are new or innovative surely get no free pass, which is why our chair, Lena Khan, has said often, and as we keep showing through more and more law enforcement actions, and I can mention a few of them later, there is no AI exception to the laws on the books. Replace AI with any other tech in that sentence, and it's still true.
Yeah.
and it's true whether you're in real life or in the metaverse or in some instance of the multiverse, or if we're all in a giant computer simulation, guess what? Too bad the FTC Act still applies.
That's pretty clear. Christina, how is your agency thinking about it? And you're in California, so I feel like there's an added component of just how the conversation is developing from a regulatory standpoint. Would love to just hear from you how your office has thought about it.
Sure. I would just want to say that, there's a long history of artificial intelligence being used in financial services. So, we're not starting from zero with trying to better understand generative AI use cases. But what our department has seen is just good old fashioned falsehoods, right? These are not edge cases. The enforcement actions that the department has taken have gone after organizations that were claiming to use AI in ways that they weren't. We even had one of these companies that was caught up in the sweep was actually using artificial intelligence to generate its own CEO and have it do a script. And so, as Michael has said, right, this is something that is already illegal. And is not, these are not, as I said, edge cases. Thanks.
That, speaking of enforcement, Chrissy, I'm coming back to you because that's where I think you were headed a little bit. The question keeps coming to my mind. I 100% get it. If a company is misleading or saying something that they're not doing and they're kind of capitalizing through lies, makes a ton of sense as to why you'd want to enforce those things. But my guess is that it's not always that clear. My guess is that it's not always clear when something is crossing a line, and probably why there's like about 100 folks listening in today just to understand, like, what is it, what do you look for in your enforcement? When is it something like, how does the SEC looking at these enforcement actions? I mean, Gurbir Grewal, director of enforcement, he specifically warned companies against making overbroad and overstated AI claims that mislead investors. What is that? And what's like a couple of tidbits that companies can use to stay mindful when they're promoting their AI technologies to shareholders to not cross that line?
Yeah, I think one thing that might be helpful to illustrate this is to walk through a couple examples of cases. And so I wanted to briefly mention two enforcement cases announced on the same date in March of this year. So those involve settled charges against two registered investment advisors, Delphia and Global Predictions, for making false and misleading statements about their purported use of AI. So according to the SEC's order here, Delphia claimed that it put collective data to work to make our artificial intelligence smarter so it can predict which companies and trends are about to make it big and invest in them before everyone else. And also, according to the order, Global Predictions falsely claimed to be the first regulated AI financial advisor and misrepresented that its platform provided expert AI-driven forecasts. So both statements were false and misleading. Here, neither of the firms had the AI capabilities they claimed. So that is AI washing. And I think, as I mentioned, the basic idea here is that actors are going to seek to exploit the current interest in all things AI, including excitement about investing in companies in the AI space or retaining investment professionals using AI. And I think a helpful concept to come back to is mentioned by our chair, Gary Gensler, when he said, we've seen time and time again, when new technologies come along, they create buzz for investors as well as false claims. And so, the same risks and issues have come up in the past with respect to crypto, with respect to the ESG movement, where actors are capitalizing on strong waves of investor interest. So I think it's just important to be mindful that the same statutory provisions and standards that the Commission has applied for years in dealing with false statements, misrepresentation, and deception by issuers and others, this would also apply in instances of AI washing. So that could be the anti-fraud provisions of the Securities Act, the Exchange Act, and the Advisors Act.
I then have to ask, that makes a ton of sense. It's similar to how, Enforcement Director Gruber Graywall has been vocal. FTC has equally been pretty vocal about just the number of concerns for consumers around AI and AI washing specifically. Michael, could you expand on the type of AI-related marketing practices that the FTC would be particularly monitoring, and why, AI washing is such a serious consumer protection risk? I think we've made an assumption in this conversation that it's bad, but can you walk us through, one, why is it so bad? And two, what kind of practices has the SEC really targeted?
So as for why it poses serious consumer protection risks, let me answer in two parts. First, we're talking about a broad set of technological tools that are not well understood and that have been subject to this sustained barrage of marketing hype. The term AI is itself amorphous at best. And we always say, well, really, it's a marketing term. But actually, it was originally conceived as a marketing term. John McCarthy, who's known as a so-called father of AI, co-authored the document that coined the term. And then years later in a speech, he said that they came up with it because they were using that document to get funding and they wanted to get the attention of the people with the money. As Meredith Whittaker said recently in an interview, AI is the narrative. It's not the technology. And second, many of these tools simply aren't reliable or don't work at all or don't work as advertised. Some have privacy and security risks, which we've dealt with, or biased results, all of which are more problematic if they're being employed in areas where businesses are using the tools to make consequential decisions about consumers in finance or housing or employment or health, or where consumers are making decisions on their own about what to buy and what services to use. And all of that is even more problematic given concerns for some kinds of AI products relating to the effects of automation bias and anthropomorphism and the general lack of transparency in how a lot of these tools are built or work. So in terms of the marketing practices targeted to date, we also have an enforcement sweep that we announced just a few weeks ago named Operation AI Comply. And 4 of the 5 cases involve deceptive AI claims. One, my favorite, is against Do Not Pay, a company that claimed to offer an AI service that was, quote, the world's first robot lawyer, but was sadly, or happily for some of us who are lawyers, unable to support claims that it could substitute for the expertise of a human lawyer. And the other 3 cases involved business opportunity schemes with claims that AI tools could help people make money by opening online storefronts. We have 3 earlier cases that are very similar to that, involving claims that AI or an algorithm can make people rich. So that's like stuff that's like it's kind of moving towards the SEC area, right? Because we're talking about things that will make people money. We also have a case from the last year or two against a company using AI claims to convince people to enroll in bogus career training, and one against a company that allegedly deceived users about the accuracy of its DNA reports, which supposedly used AI for genetic matching. And the last one I'll mention is a case from a few months ago against NGL Labs, which made deceptive claims about the use of AI to provide content moderation in an anonymous messaging app that we said it unlawfully marketed to kids. And there are more cases to come.
Fascinating. And, I think one of the toughest parts about, walking through the number of examples is kind of deriving that internal formula for companies of, all right, great. Now that we have these 3 or 4 data points, what should we do or not do? And we'll get to a couple of best practices a little later in this conversation, but I wanted to bring you in, Christina, because, one of the focuses of DFPI is the fintech sector. And, it's a great playground for AI innovation. I mean, it's already a disruptive industry. And on top of that, now you have this new technology that's pretty sexy. And so I imagine there's a lot of great activity and maybe not some great activity happening in that space. Um, on top of that, California is generally pretty on top of its fintech innovation and AI, now AI regulation, right? And so, or at least trying to push for some. How is, what are the specific challenges that you're seeing as an office in kind of regulating the AI enhanced financial product space? And I bring this in because it's helpful to get a more specific industry perspective rather than kind of a lot of our listeners may be part of the fintech world. Some of them might be in another industry. Just want to think about, bring us into the fintech space and how this is showing up.
Sure. So by every measure, right, California is the birthplace of innovation and a leader in AI, as you said at the start. And so, these very much informed the governor's executive order issued last year. And I want to quote just a few sentences from the governor when that executive order was issued, because I think they're really instructive about how California is approaching it. And what the governor said was, we recognize both the potential benefits and risks these tools enable. We're neither frozen by the fears nor hypnotized by the upside. We're taking a clear-eyed, humble approach to this world-changing technology, asking questions, seeking answers from experts, focused on shaping the future of ethical, transparent, and trustworthy AI, doing what California always does, leading the world in technological progress. And DFPI is following the governor's lead, right? We are taking a whole of DFPI approach to make sure that we coordinate our supervision and regulatory approach to ensure consumer protection, promote innovation, and actually to drive our own operational excellence. We are ensuring that we effectively deploy AI consistent with the governor's executive order and the guidelines issued by our colleagues at GovOps. And if you haven't seen, there's a whole framework for procurement and deployment that was issued, and that's posted on the GovOps website. We are systematically growing our AI expertise, and we're focused within the department on things that are clearly within our jurisdiction. Fair lending, right? We're looking at those new lending models. Do we understand the ways in which they're operating? Do we understand the ways in which they're being deployed, and who the partners, because it's often done through fintech partnerships, right? Who the partners of our licensees are. We're using AI and we're considering the ways in which it's improving compliance and supervision, right? Regulatory tech and supervisory tech. We're looking at consumer protection. So we've done a consumer education campaign around AI-related scams and fraud. And we're looking at applications relating to helping us improve our own operations, right? I mentioned the operational excellence. And the framework that we're applying is the same framework that was used in the report issued by our GovOps colleague, right, about generative AI. And it's looking at what are the shared risks, right? What are the amplified risks by generative AI, and what are the new risks? And as mentioned earlier, right, we have consistently seen the use of AI in financial services for a long time. So we're trying to take that same look, right? To the extent that our laws already apply, as I mentioned, right, fair lending laws apply, and are there going to be some amplified risks, or are we anticipating new risks, right? We're also, as I mentioned, using AI to improve our own operations. And I'm very proud of our colleagues in our IT division. We actually have a Gen AI chatbot that we use in our internal operations. So, we're really trying to follow the governor's lead and be humble, ask questions, get smart, and also think about the ways in which the laws that we already are responsible for apply.
That is one really interesting to hear. Would love to have our own Gen AI chatbot over at the Center for Law and Business, maybe one day. This brings me, I have a question that's still on my mind, and that question is, I don't, I'm not a practitioner in a lot of these spaces myself, but as I'm thinking about perhaps a more entrepreneurial journey, what I'd want to do is, man, I'd want to tell everyone about this cool AI thing I'm thinking about. Man, I don't have something built yet, but gosh, I'm already thinking about it. I've got a document where I'm building something out and it's so exciting. I should probably get a bunch of people in on it. Let me see if people are interested in investing in this, right? So there's reasonable hype and excitement around a pre model, if you would, of something that's not yet AI. And I guess let's start with you, Michael. What is it that becomes a red flag? How do we identify these are red flags? These are common red flags when you're doing your investigation and you're finding indicative things, clues that, oh, this is AI washing. I ask this because I think it could not be reiterated enough, especially as innovators specifically are moving really, really fast, thinking not at all in some ways about these ramifications at all, and often relying on counsel, which is great when you have counsel, but a lot of companies, especially when they're smaller, um, you know, move fast, break things, And so curious to know, how can we give some tidbits to those folks around what are some common red flags and how can you just steer clear of that?
First thing I might say is maybe try moving slow and building things instead of moving fast and breaking things. But let me mix in a few things that may get our attention as red flags with other things that should maybe really get anyone's attention when evaluating AI marketing claims. So the big one is like strong, unconditional claims about efficacy, about the product working in a particular way, including specific claims regarding the accuracy of predictions or outputs. Another one would be to look out for product demos that appear to be tightly scripted and controlled. We see a lot of this with respect to the use of robots. Someone, I think I just looked quickly at the Q&A a few minutes ago, and someone I think had asked a question about that. Look for false attributions of agency or personhood to an AI tool. Look for bald claims about future progress or versions or features that don't exist now, but buy it now and we'll get that, feature in our product soon. It doesn't work very well now, but, pay for $1,000 a month subscription service and you'll be the first one to have one of these working products in a year. And then it doesn't happen. Or bald claims about productivity, which is something that might affect business customers more without any support to back up that is actually going to make a company more productive, unless they just fire a whole bunch of employees and hope the AI tool does a good enough job in their place. Another one would be downplaying the likely human labor behind whatever automation is supposedly going on when the tool is at work. And another one would be sidestepping questions when they are posed about how a product works by making sleight of hand comparisons to or that diminish human intelligence and skills, trying to avoid having to answer those questions. In terms of what industries we see it in, I mean, it's across, as reflected by the cases that we've brought to date, it's all over the place. All kinds of industries, all kinds of products and AI systems. A bunch of the cases we brought to date, do focus on business opportunity schemes. I can't really talk about things that are in our investigative sites, but I have written about some other types of products in blog posts, like suspicious marketing claims for tools that supposedly detect whether something is AI generated, which is relevant to people in academia, and bots offered with false claims that they'll provide human level companionship or professional level counseling. But those are just a few examples.
You mentioned kind of claims around AI products that give or attribute personhood. Just to understand that a little better, do you mean when you create like an AI bot and you're like, this is basically just a human being named Bob and they can do a bunch of stuff? Is that what we mean by personhood, or is there something more nuanced there?
It would be, yeah, it would be like claims that um a bot or an avatar can
Mm.
do something that only a human could do.
Oh, I see.
Um, have a personality, have emotions, be able to tell what your emotions are, be on your side, all that kind of stuff when it's being sold as, something that can be helpful to you. It's not that, all such bots are illegal or anything, but it just depends on what kind of claims you're making about them.
Yeah. And, as we're thinking about, and as you're describing some of these technologies, the thing that comes to my mind is we're so early. We're so early in how AI can be used and the number of ways in which new products and services will pop up in the years to come. And it's both obviously exciting, but there is a lot of fear, I think, that folks feel around just the kind of Wild West that the AI frontier really is. And so maybe Christina and then Michael or Chrissy, you can also chime in, but how do you three envision collaboration amongst federal regulators and state governments, and any efforts that you might have way to help kind of think through and have a uniform understanding of AI washing? And I know, Christina, you mentioned that your office even uses Gen AI to understand it better, to kind of speak that language. Are there kind of efforts that, California regulators have in place to kind of connect with kind of that federal level or perhaps across states? I'd just love to know. This is a big question, and I think it goes to one of our participants' question around it. What will it take? Who can regulate this massive thing? So tell me where to start.
Well, I'm super proud of the collaboration that DFPI has with our federal colleagues. We work with our regulator colleagues to better understand the ways in which artificial intelligence is being deployed. So we also work with our state colleagues. I made reference to the directives from GovOps, right? We have these frameworks within California government for the way California government uses and deploys AI and generative AI. But we also are looking to get smarter, as I mentioned. So let me talk about just a handful of recent initiatives. We did joint office hours with our colleagues from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau to better understand some of the anti-fraud technologies, right? Fraud is a huge issue. Artificial intelligence can really make dramatic improvements. And so we had a number of companies that came and really helped us understand what's going on under the hood. Super helpful, really important for our understanding, and very grateful to industry for coming to help us, help educate us. Another initiative, which is really important to the commissioner, is around building generational wealth and increasing financial security. So we held joint office hours with our San Francisco Federal Reserve Bank innovation office colleagues and community development colleagues to better understand the ways in which data and innovation can really improve financial outcomes and increase financial inclusion. And then I think, as I mentioned, right, we're trying to get smarter. We want to really learn from our colleagues and figure out what do they know. And so I'm thrilled to say that Michael actually came and did a talk at our agency for staff. And we host what we call innovation conversations, where we have experts come in and share their knowledge. Michael was generous enough to do that. We've also had colleagues from the chief technology CTO for the FTC, as well as other thought leaders, academics and industry experts come talk to us. So, we're really trying to be humble, as I quoted, right, the governor say, and really asking people to help us learn. And it's been really gratifying to have experts such as Michael and others come talk to us. We also, I would be remiss if I didn't mention our weekly drop-in office hours. So my office hosts office hours for anyone who wants to sign up. And those are also opportunities. That's Tuesday mornings from 9 to 10. And we welcome increased conversation and additional dialogue.
Michael, you've been mentioned. Tell us how the FTC does this.
Well, we collaborate with other federal and state regulators all the time. including on particular enforcement matters. And the AI space is no exception. For example, I've spoken, as have my colleagues, several times with Chrissy's colleagues at the SEC about AI claims in general and in connection with a particular investigation, which I think may reflect the fact that, like we're kind of talking about before, there is, some overlap sometimes where, a company might be making similarly, allegedly deceptive claims to consumers and to investors. And we both have authority over that kind of thing.
And I can imagine there's probably a lot of that, right? Any company that's, I don't know why you wouldn't go for the whole gamut. So I get it. Chrissy, then my question comes to you. There's the SEC has in some ways your charge is to ensure that there's transparency and accountability and clarity in the market conversation for investors and for companies alike. And my question is, this is a sophisticated audience. The folks that are engaging with the SEC are more sophisticated than, say, someone who is pressing a subscribe button on an AI product from their Apple iPhone and hopes for the best. So my question to you is, we're seeing a lot, at least in the Bay Area, around industry-led self-regulation efforts, principles being developed around responsible marketing or responsible development, a lot of things like that. Do you think that there's room for self-regulation in kind of the AI washing world? And specifically where businesses develop their own ethical standards around, we shouldn't AI wash. And if that's the case, and if you're seeing some kind of activity in that space, how would you as a regulator see these efforts?
Yeah, and I think what I'll comment on here is what I think businesses can take away from SEC enforcement actions that may guide them in their internal processes. And of course, it's good to have good internal controls, and self-regulation can be beneficial. At the same time, I think whether it's new or old technology at issue, as I mentioned, the statutory framework for us is the same at the SEC. So if actors are breaking the rules, I think it's common sense that SEC enforcement would be interested. And in terms of AI washing, I described our enforcement actions in Delphia and the global predictions cases. Those were the charges against 2 registered investment advisors. And so I think the SEC's actions should serve as notice to the investment industry. So if you're claiming to use AI in your investment processes, ensure that your representations are not false or misleading. And I did also want to highlight the issue of potential disclosure failures by issuers, including publicly listed companies, separate and apart from AI washing. And I think with all of the positives that stem from the continued development and adoption of AI across various sectors, there have also been some corresponding risks and challenges for certain companies. So among other things, those risks could be competitive, operational, or legal in nature. And if they're material, then they should be disclosed to investors to make sure that investors have all the information they need to make informed decisions about whether to buy or purchase or sell a security. So for example, the deployment of new AI tools in a certain industry could make prior business models obsolete or add significant competitive pressure to existing players in the industry. So under such circumstances, it may be necessary for certain of the existing players in the industry to disclose facts surrounding the competitive risks posed by AI to the companies and the impact of that competition on financial prospects. And importantly, I think a final point on this, to be most useful to investors, disclosures should really be specific to the company at issue and the particular operations and risks of that company.
I have to ask in that case, and maybe Michael, you can also chime in, and Christina, but obviously there's competitive risk, right? AI is famously known to replace basically everybody and anyone who's a human being, right? So we all kind of live in that fear a little bit. And for sure, for companies, it is very important that they stay competitive. And from kind of that philosophical capitalism perspective, in some ways, that's a good thing that you get that churn in the market and you get the most efficient ideas, products, services that lower costs and whatnot. So then my question then is, do you think that aggressive enforcement would stifle this innovation, requiring attention to competitive risks and things like that, particularly for early stage companies, which aren't going to go public for a while, but, now that there's this culture, I guess, or a global understanding around perhaps these risks are too far. Do you think that it could stifle innovation? That's my question. And, how do your agencies ensure that good innovation keeps happening without while you go around enforcing and penalizing kind of negative behaviors? And I think this is obviously probably shown up in a number of industries and technologies, but would love to just hear, maybe Michael, you can kick us off on and what you think aggressive enforcement could stifle innovation. This is a popular view. I'm sure you've heard it before.
Yeah, my short answer is no. The longer answer is, if people who are making that argument are thinking of AI washing merely as, tech bros bloviating generally about how great AI is or will be someday, like that's not what we're talking about here. We're going after companies making deceptive claims in the sale of particular products and services. And if you don't like that because it doesn't jive with your, techno-optimist, quasi-religious or accelerationist views or whatever about the tech, tough. Going after fraud or deceptive marketing claims doesn't harm innovation, period. I would say it boosts innovation because it better ensures that honest and well-meaning investors are the ones more likely to get support and succeed instead of attention and money going to high-tech grifters. What actually harms innovation more than enforcement of existing law is industry concentration, whether we're talking about monopolies or just a few large companies that dictate ultimately who is making what for whom based on their control of certain elements and infrastructure and based on the money and the scale involved. And putting aside the harm to consumers and businesses and the marketplace in general, if we didn't enforce the law in this area, I think it's also important to consider indirect costs. And these aren't necessarily FTC issues, but I'm thinking about like the environment and labor here based on the hype cycle around generative AI, which does not appear to have generated commensurate social value or real productivity gains to date. By the logic of those who would have us take a hands-off approach in areas involving tech innovation, the government should have just left Elizabeth Holmes and Sam Bankman-Fried alone, just let them keep faking it. And so in an echo of what our chair has said about there being no AI exception to existing laws, the Attorney General Garland said in connection with the Department of Justice's case against Binance, the crypto exchange, using new technology to break the law does not make you a disruptor. It makes you a criminal.
Mm. I would love to hear your thoughts, Christina.
So the DFPI's mission is to promote fair and honest business practices and a responsible innovation. And we think, one is a necessary precondition to the other, right? Fair and honest business practices. So the California Consumer Financial Protection Law strengthened California's ability to protect consumers and was designed to allow DFPI to regulate and supervise emerging products and services. So to the extent that companies have questions, and they're already licensed, please speak to your examiner. And to the extent that companies have questions and they're at the earlier stages, we welcome them to our office hours and really we can help them understand DFPI expectations.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think that the perspective for, regulatory overreach will persist because of kind of the difficulty in understanding some of the regulations or how some of these of your agencies are placed in the conversation. And, in some ways it's the job of folks like myself or attorneys or advisors to really both demystify, but also educate innovators around why these charges exist and why your agencies are focused on what you're focused on. I'm mindful of the time and we have a couple of questions. So before we jump to the Q&A, I wanted to give the three of you the floor to share with us, I've tried to, extract what I think from you would cross the line, what would be considered a bad behavior, what would get someone into the territory of AI washing. I wanted to quickly, go into the preventative part of this, and maybe Chrissy, you can kick us off on, where do you see all of this going, and how do you see, one, how can companies steer clear of AI washing, and two, where are we going to be in the future? How is your agency kind of thinking about the evolution of this industry and your role in it?
Yeah, and that's a lot to think about, and I'll try to
In
wrap
like
up
1 minute. Yeah.
really briefly without repeating myself too much. But I think one thing I wanted to reiterate is, again, that the same statutory provisions and standards that the Commission has applied for years dealing with false statements, misreps, and deception by issuers or investment professionals are applying here. So maybe new technology, but same standards. And I think just thinking about the big picture, advancements in AI will likely lead to a lot of benefits and efficiencies, hopefully, including in the financial sector. But at the same time, clearly the risk for fraud and misuse is significant here. So it's really something that investors, SEC registrants, and regulators all need to be vigilant about. And I'll leave the rest of the time to others.
Yeah. Maybe Michael.
So, I described earlier the types of deceptive claims that we cover, but the legal standard for deception that we're operating under here is whether there's a representation, omission, or practice that is likely to mislead the consumer, acting reasonably in the circumstances to the consumer's detriment. And the wording of that standard reflects that some marketing claims aren't actionable, such as statements that are mere puffery, like what I was saying before. AI is great, our product is the best. Or obviously exaggerated claims that don't fool an ordinary consumer, claims involving subjective taste or someone's real honest opinion, or most important often is claims that are not material, meaning that they aren't likely to influence a consumer's choice of or conduct regarding a product. So there are things that are actionable and things that aren't actionable, even if they might not be true with respect to whether you want to call it AI washing or AI hype. So in terms of our overall role, we've discussed today deceptive claims about AI, but our larger role on the consumer protection side is also to look at things like how generative AI tools are used for fraud or result in other downstream harms. We've looked at privacy and security issues with AI systems, like the unfair use of facial recognition technology, which was at issue in our Rite Aid case, and deceptive or unfair collection of people's information for training AI models, which was at issue in our cases against Ring and Alexa. Unfairness can encompass discrimination and bias as well. And we've also been involved in rulemaking and market studies and business and consumer guidance, public workshops, reports, et cetera, relating to AI. And we also did a recent official government challenge for innovators to address fraud via voice cloning. And I mentioned concentration before. The other side of our agency is the Bureau of Competition, which deals with antitrust and is looking at a range of issues involving industry concentration and partnerships between players in the AI industry. So lots going on here.
Lots indeed. Christina, any parting words for our audience?
I would just say, there's a lot of laws already on the books that apply to the framework that I described, right? The shared, amplified, and likely many of the new risks. So, we welcome industry to continue to educate us, but we also will continue to use the laws on the books to protect Californians.
Thank you.